welcome to the second segment of Kukosha Konversations. This segment will be about love. So the first question I want to ask is, we all speak, and oftentimes in the worst context, speak about Black women's love and how transformative it is, and how, you know, Black men would like love to transform their lives and make them better people. But historically, I think as all of us, in whatever journey you've been in, there has been one person or two people or a group of people that have really embodied the kind of love that has made you who you are, and that has allowed you to give of yourself, or that has allowed you to love yourself or realize who you are. How do you think we as kind of the feminist movement can love each other better? Are there things that we aren't doing currently that you think we could be doing? Are there things that we are possibly doing that are harmful and that are hindering us from loving each other? And what does that mean? Because obviously we don't want to get into the whole all women should get along and all women should be best friends. That's not what we're talking about. So you're free to dislike someone. But how do we take that love and make sure that we are loving ourselves better and that we're loving the people around us better? Any initial thoughts?
I'd say how can we love ourselves much better is by understanding that we don't have to be identical. We don't have to have the same message. Come as you are. What are your struggles? Okay, can I help? Can I not help? But I need to understand and include you in the conversation.
I think love as inclusion is a really powerful message for me, because I think it's much easier than we assume sometimes to really dismiss or erase the lived experiences of women whose narratives are just very different from our own. I think especially as women with whatever kind of privileges we have, it can be so hard to see beyond what we understand as a lack of that privilege. And so love as inclusion, and inclusion in a very genuine way, inclusion which involves and prioritizes listening first and foremost, I think is so critical, because without hearing each other and without kind of seeing each other as being more than just us and more than just the narratives that we constantly hear about or that we've lived through, then is it really love? Yeah. So love as inclusion is really strong for me.
I think a good prologue before I start is the feminist species I interact with are very classed and very inaccessible sometimes and very intellectual. So with that said, I think a good way to practice love sometimes is to unintellectualize feminisms and just center care and kindness, because I can understand intellectually that poverty is violence and that, you know, especially poor Black women go through this and this and this, but then it doesn't translate into how I practice feminism. And so love as unintellectualizing feminism and translating it into practical empathy and love and kindness and so on and so forth.
For me, you mentioned something about because we know this, it's become a genre online of Black women saved me, you know, they healed me. and it's always, for me, it's strange because it's always outward facing. So Black women are expected to perform healing and care and love outward. But then goodness forbid you do it for yourself, So goodness forbid you become this self-loving hoity-toity character, because it's always, self-love always becomes hoity-toityness according to many people. So when we think of, like just to quote Dr. Wandi Anjoya, who's a Kenyan thinker, love as revolution. So the revolutionary power of love, in the sense that when we think about the current, like the heterocapitalist patriarchy, right, that encourages contempt. So love as an antidote to contempt, right? So that encourages certain ways of, like as she said, poverty as violence. So love as an antidote to that, right? So what does that look like? The introspection, for example, when you're in, like for me, my spaces are also classed and extremely intellectual. So what does that look like when I go to a space, for example, I'm invited by a group of sex workers and I have to spend the whole time silent because I am the one who doesn't know. Yeah, I am the one who doesn't know, and then I have to, so I have to be quiet, I have to listen, and only when I am asked is when I respond. So that kind of interaction. So also love as introspection and I think the death of love as intent. So whenever people, because there's this thing I really dislike seeing where people say that was not my intention, and I don't care what your intention was. So you could have wanted the best, but did you think past your intent? Did you think about the outcome of your behavior? Did you center other people in your decision making? So that kind of, like that love as a revolution in that kind of way. So putting other people in the center, like thinking about them, letting them speak for themselves, you know, and expanding who gets to be heard, who gets to do certain things. So for me, those are the ways in which you should practice, and also teaching Black women that it is okay to love themselves, not to perform. Like their first responsibility is to themselves, right? You have Black women working hard, you know what I mean? Raising children, attending all funerals and weddings, you know, getting super fatigued, right? But God forbid they take a moment and go on a spa date. Suddenly they're extremely selfish. So, I don't know. And even then, like the thinking about like what are acceptable activities, what does self-love and self-care look like? I've been reading a lot about self-care as self-sabotage. So thinking about like, because...
Who would drag me?
So yes, that's absolutely me. Because and something really interesting that I've been getting into is, of course, the prevailing system creates these anxieties and then gives you an antidote like wellness and self-care, you know, packaged in, you know.
These are also very class ways of experiencing love.
So who has access to that? Because that's also very inaccessible, and masks and everything else. So how do we make love accessible? How do we make this self-care accessible? So those are all questions I'm interested in at the moment.
I have a question though. How, to you all, how much do you think you've healed from love given by fellow Black women who are going through the same traumas?
Actually, I haven't.
It's a whole genre on Twitter, but we actually need to understand, you know, what can you give love from a place of trauma, you know, which also goes back to the question of self-care as well.
I think, for me, I think just to that last question, can you give love from a place of trauma? I think that there are possibilities. So, for example, kind of as a rape survivor, I think that there are certain things that in that moment, if we're having a conversation about sexual violence, immediately I am triggered. At the same time, I am aware of the fact that there's somebody else who feels what I feel, and in that moment, I can connect with them. So there is space for it. It may not be that I can give all of myself and all of that love, because I've had to transfer that into me, and I'm still dealing with that. But in that moment, there is a slither. There's like a little like window, you know, where I'm like, okay, I am inside myself and I can understand how this has affected me, but I can also understand how it's affected the person sitting next to me.
I can stretch
I can stretch even within that pain. I can still find the capacity to stretch. But I wasn't always that way. So in the beginning, that wasn't me. I had no capacity to do that. But where I am now, because I found ways to kind of heal myself, and I've spoken to friends and family who have been part of that journey of loving me out of my pain, I am at a point where I'm not fully past it, but I can still stretch out. And I think there's capacity for it, but it really depends. It depends on where you are. It depends on what you're going through. It depends on how much you've depends on how much you've healed. And if you haven't, to then expect someone to stretch outside of themselves, even though they haven't healed from within themselves, is completely unreasonable. So I think there's space for it, but it really depends.
I think for me, I just always say, show me a black woman who's not broken, right? Like who hasn't experienced certain, it's just a matter of levels, the levels of trauma that we have each experienced, based on, of course, accidents of birth and also that their lives will be accidents of birth, and then I was like, is that what you said? Accidents of birth being, just normal things like were you born rich or poor, because a lot of the oppressions that we face are just solely by virtue of accidents of birth, right? And then now you are in this space and that's the space you occupy, and we have decided that is your, that's your lot in life. So black women obviously have multiple societal violences inflicted upon themselves, upon their bodies, and even then, because this is what keeps me optimistic, even then we are still able to create community, we are still able to create knowledge, to create spaces, and so for me that shows that there is it exists, right? Like people who are traumatized in varying ways have created spaces, have written, like when you read someone like Audre Lorde, for example, and other black women who have been like luminaries in the black feminist movement, and even people here like Modoni Dikimani and all these other women, you realize that they all had to deal with a lot, and still they created this space, and still they give so much of themselves. So for me that's just evidence that we have lived these experiences, and we still continue to share and to love each other and to create.
I think for me, I believe that that love that we can give, especially that love that is when it's so closely connected to your trauma, I think that whatever level or however you kind of iterate that love should be something that you fully decide on your own. Like I think that there should be a lot of agency to it. So I have friends who are rape survivors who have been on the campus of my alma mater, were very kind of strongly involved in trying to end like sexual abuse on campus and sexual harassment on campus, and that is the love that they could give. I think it's an equally powerful love is someone who is recovering from a particularly bad depressive or anxious episode, and checks on a friend who is going through one, and asks them, you sure you took your meds today? Like, I think that is love. And so I think the most important thing is to let that person give the love that they can, which is so closely connected to their trauma, and to also, how can I put it? To also understand that that person sometimes will need space, I think when you are trying to help someone to heal from a trauma that is so related to your own, I think that sometimes you get so triggered that you also just need your own healing from that process. And I think that will always be valid. It's a beautiful thing that I see amongst a lot of black women of, understanding when someone has been triggered enough by whatever good work that they are doing within very traumatic spaces, really, really appreciating that someone just needs room sometimes before they can give that love again. And I think that's a beautiful thing.